Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets, how to increase your market business success while providing people with fresh food. Farmers markets are essential. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer or food maker selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast. This week we're chatting with Kathy Zeman, Executive Director of the Minnesota Farmers Market Association, about how to effectively advocate on the behalf of small farmers and farmers markets. Hey everyone, I'm one of your hosts, Bridget Myers. I'm a longtime farmers market manager and education coordinator at Farmers Market Pros.
And I'm Kat Fields-White, Director of San Diego Markets, still an active farmers market manager and consultant, founder of Farmers Market Pros, and host of Intense, the Farmers Market Conference, and the Farmers Market Pros community.
And I'm Justine Marzoni-Mead, Tent Talk producer, marketing director for Farmers Market Pros, and logistics coordinator for Intense, the Farmers Market Conference, coming right up March 6th, 7th, and 8th, 2023.
In San Diego, where it's lovely this time of year, or from your very own computer, where you can stay in your jammies. So either way,
just mere months away.
Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by Vendor 101, the online class helping small farmers and food makers launch successfully at farmers markets and streamlining the application process for market managers. If you're just beginning to think about starting a farmers market business, or if you recently started operating in markets and would like to brush up on your operations knowledge, this is the class for you. If you're a market manager who would like to save staff time spent answering prospective vendors' inquiries and help new farmers and vendors get off to a good start, connecting them with Vendor 101 is the answer. Register today at vendor-101.com or find more information by clicking the Vendor 101 logo on the homepage at farmersmarketpros.com.
Welcome back to Tent Talk. Today, our guest is Kathy Zeman, Executive Director of the Minnesota Farmers Market Association, volunteer treasurer at Cannon Valley Farmers Market, and owner of Simple Harvest Farm Organics in Nerstrand, Minnesota, and winner of the 2021 Gus Schumacher Award, which was presented virtually at that year's Intense, the Farmers Market Conference. Having spent most of her career in agriculture, Kathy leverages the reach of the Minnesota Farmers Market Association to build strong collaborations with diverse groups, paving the way for successful public policy efforts in Minnesota and beyond. Welcome to Tent Talk, Kathy.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so glad to be here from Minnesota.
We're so excited to talk to you.
Happy to have you. That was a long introduction because Kathy's been in the business a while.
That's right.
Yeah, she's got a scroll.
Such a lovely way to say I'm old, which I am.
You and me, girl.
So wise and experienced.
Yeah, we go with the wisdom and maturity and experience as opposed to, just senior citizenship. That's how I like to phrase it. So.
Oh, well, Kathy, if you want to just kind of tell our listeners a little bit about your personal and professional background and what led you to get involved with farmers markets.
Well, as you mentioned in the intro, I've been in agriculture my entire life, right? When I was 7 years old, I was given the entire responsibility of raising all of our young livestock on our registered Holstein farm, and I never gave them up until I went to college and, got to show cows and judge cows throughout the U.S. And when other kids my age were doing like leadership things, I was busy showing cows and judging cows. So it was all about the cows. And then, I helped coach kids on quiz bowl teams and dairy judging teams, and they won contests and they got to go to Europe to judge cows. So my background is pretty deep in agriculture. And then I always knew I wanted to buy a farm. So, but of course you can't buy a farm without getting some cash for your 20% down. And so I had to go work. And so I worked in the industry. I worked for a semen company I was out in California, by the way. Our dairy farm was by Carruthers in the San Joaquin Valley, just south of Fresno. So I was in California for a wee bit. I worked for a feed company, and then I finally, bought my first 5.22 acre farm, and then went to our third farm. And now the farm that I'm on now, it's 20 acres, certified organic. And it's really highly erodible land, pretty slopey. So I have to have it in grass. And if you have it in grass, you graze livestock. And if you're a small scale farmer, you're not a commodity farmer. There is no government subsidized markets for us. So we are all in that direct marketing world. And when you're in the direct marketing world in Minnesota, this will mostly pertain to the entire U.S. because of the way the laws are structured. There's going to be a lot of state laws that are prone to numerous interpretations by a lot of people. And so as I began to sell directly to customers, and then I branched out into our first farmers market, I saw that you would like 10 miles from each other, two different farmers markets were saying the law says you have to bring a refrigerator to the farmers market to sell your eggs from. And the other one said, nah, you can just bring them in a cooler. Okay, people, that's a big difference, right? Just 10 miles away. Pretty sure we don't have laws that are like 10 miles apart. So could we figure this? So then right? So there was all of that. So I invited the Minnesota Department of Agriculture to come down to Little Northfield and do an on-site training, which did just confuse all of us because the laws are crazy. And then, fortunately or unfortunately, the Minnesota Farmers Market Association, all volunteer led, the board put out an ad that said, we need somebody to work from their home office and just be our operations manager. We need somebody to kind of organize us. So I raised my hand and said, I would love to do this, but if we do this, we're going to clean up, we're going to do public policy. We may need to change some laws. And so if that doesn't fit you, don't hire me, because otherwise 6 months down the road, you'll fire me and I'll fire you and it just won't work out that well. So they said, sure, let's do this. So 10 years later, right, I'm still happily working with the Minnesota Farmers Market Association and doing, some good work to build out the local food shed here in Minnesota and beyond, because we have a lot of cross-border sales. We've got both Dakotas, Iowa, and Wisconsin, vendors coming in from out of state, and we've got to know their laws as well as we know our laws. So that's that big background of how did I get involved in local food and in MFMA.
Awesome. Well, that seems like a great way to get involved. It sounds like they needed someone like you to come in and say, hey, we need to do this. I'll do it if you let me do it.
If you let me do it my way.
If you let me do it my way,
the highway.
Let's get it done. So what are some more of the services that MFMA provides?
We do. So if you think about the local, direct marketing, maybe other states are different, but in Minnesota, if you want to drive a car, there's a mandated driving education course, right? But there's no mandated educational service to sell food if you're not licensed. So there's licensed food people, and then the rest of us are in this unlicensed area, and there's just no outreach. So MFMA does that outreach. Now we do it with a lot of partners. When you are, so one of my sayings that nobody likes is we are the gnat on the flea, on the fly, on the tail, on the dog, right? And the little food shed, we're so fragmented, right? We are a million little mosquitoes out here, and we don't always swarm together nicely. So it's my intent to, wrap our arms around as many of us as possible. So we're kind of a cohesive movement, and then we can gain traction. So for instance, tomorrow we're kicking off our winter series. We do a 4-hour training. It's called Blazing Trails Through the Jungle of Food Regulations. We do it on Zoom. It's 4 hours. We tell people to get the drink of their choice, grab their jammies and sit down, and we're going to hammer through this. And so, in the United States, meat and dairy, those laws are 1906 and 1908. So the laws governing all of those food products are old. Many of those laws no longer fit 2022.
It's like pre-refrigeration.
Yeah, right. Yeah, before the refrigerators.
And before antibiotics.
Right. Yeah.
It's just, right. So just think and then of course, and because those are set at the federal level, there's not a lot states can do, but states can do a lot then with other sets of laws. If we were thinking about prepared laws, in Minnesota, there is the U.S. Food Code. And each state can decide to just accept the U.S. one, or you can modify it. So, we in Minnesota, we modify ours. So there are other laws that we can do that we can modify. Some we can't, some we can. And so we do that training. So in Minnesota, in any given day, my hunch is that we sell and eat more food that is not licensed than it is licensed. And so we always start with food safety. No matter what we train people, let's try to be food safe. Because if you are selling food into your local food shed, if you ever have a foodborne illness, it's going to be somebody you know, right? It's not like you're a big commodity farmer and you just sell your beef into the JBS, system. And if they have a food recall on that meat, that's on them. It could be your animal. You'll never know. But here in the local food shed, where there's, millions of us little folks, we're going to know our people. So we always stress food safety first. And then let's try to get everybody legal, because that would also be important. But so we do all that training. So it's food laws, much beyond just farmers market vendors. We have a lot of direct marketing farmers. We have a lot of food makers, right? That wouldn't necessarily, but it doesn't matter. If you think about, the big box theory, you never see a big box store go in by themselves, right? You always have to have enough big box stores. So you've got enough product there to get a lot of customers. The same thing happens in the local food shed. For our people to buy local, it's extra work, right? To get to a farmer's market or to buy direct. So we try to, anything that touches our local food shed, MFMA wants to help build out education and build out both food safety and legality. And so we do that. We also do training on markets. So markets, here's how, here are the business structures. Here's the insurance you're going to want to need to know. Here is how you're going to pay employees, right? We have to do employee training. In Minnesota, we have crazy sales tax. In Minnesota, food is not taxed. If you buy jam and jelly at a grocery store, no tax. If you buy jam and jelly at a farmer's market, there's a tax. It's just the way that crazy. I know. It's just crazy. The way the crazy.
Wow. I mean, so how are they rationalizing that? Are they calling it a gift item at the farmer's market?
No, it's the way that, so I don't think, obviously we didn't help write that one. And this is like the next law I have to go work on. The law says that whoever combines two ingredients, that is taxed. So a farmer, if I'm the farmer and I make my jam and jelly, I'm the one adding the two ingredients together, right? Sugar, pectin, blueberries. So I have to add sales tax. But the grocery store is buying it wholesale from Kathy Zeman. They're not making the jam, so they can sell it without tax. It is real. And so do you think all of our cottage food producers in Minnesota know this? No, there's no outreach. So we do that. Our people don't like us then.
You're the bearer of bad news.
Yeah, don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, I always tell them, okay, folks, so I'm going to be the dream crusher today.
That's what we call Kat.
That is what they call me, yes. I break hearts for a living.
And I tell them, if you need to swear at me under your breath, you just do that. I've sworn. Yeah, just trust me. This is going to, but so my point to our farmers and our food makers, we need to know the law better than anybody else. We need to own this. This is our industry. And we do not tolerate nor want anybody else to invade or, come into our industry and not know what we're all about. So that's our job. So we do the painful training on all these lovely topics that no one really wants to know. But we need to know it, and then we'll be able to identify what needs to change. That's why we changed a couple of them already. And we'll continue to do this. Again, always stressing food safety and legality. And if COVID taught us anything, it taught us how incredibly fragile having huge systems were, right? Because they crashed and burned all over the place. And yet the local food shed held together, right? We know how to grow food. Minnesota is really fun, right? Even though our growing season isn't as long as California's, obviously, it's like, 6 months maybe. But we can grow a lot of food. We're a very rich state in our resources. And so if we can grow it, then why don't we add value to it? And we keep all of those dollars local in our local community. The economic, no one likes to hear me say this, and I don't have the latest latest data yet. It's coming from our FM 360. But I think the economic value of farmers markets in this state will outproduce the dairy industry very quickly. That would be bad words, right? Because cows are kind of sacred in Minnesota. We love our dairy industry. You're talking to a former Princess K of the Milky Way here. So I understand how the dairy industry is not going to want to hear that. But the amount of food that we can grow and then we can make into these really cool things and then sell them to our neighbors, this is a wonderful industry. And we want it to be food safe and legal. And so that's what MFMA is all about. It's just growing the local food chain.
Do people there realize that the farmers market industry is bigger than the dairy industry? One of our whole themes this year is kind of trying to make people aware of the strength and the power and the enormity of what we're doing at farmers markets and how nobody seems to realize that. We get no respect.
Yeah, Kat, not yet, because again, so, remember I'm old and have been in ag for a long time. So the USDA ag census only asks for data on agriculture that is subsidized by taxes. Nobody in the local food shed is, so they don't gather any of this information, right? That is why, with the help of the University of Minnesota Applied Economics Department, we've got something that we call FM 360. And it is collecting that critical data on farmers markets. And now FM 360 has been able to branch out into other like CSAs, anything that is in direct marketing. That's where we're picking up some of this good data. To date, we are cobbling this together with a handful of grants. I started it last year, didn't make that much headway, trust me. And I'll continue but I'm going to our state legislature and saying, look, there's this industry out here that is tremendously viable, and we have no data on it. Last year in Minnesota, we gave $6.6 million to the gas stations coming out of our ag budget. Because then we could, Kat, I see that look on your face and you're like,
Say what now?
Right? Because it helps out the corn and soybean farmers in biofuels. I say, good. We could use 6.6 million in the local food shed, and we could have many, 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 many commercial kitchens in every little township hall, right? They've all got kitchens. What if we've got nine farmers markets that are licensed food hubs. They're always going to need a little bit of money to make it. Why wouldn't we come up with a public investment to build up commercial kitchens and community food hubs and really let this the people, food safe and legally grow this local food shed? What if we find out how big it really is? So the USDA all those surveys are tax funded. My argument to our legislature is, and will continue to be, if we could free up $200,000 a year, seriously, it's budget dust. If we could figure out $200,000 a year, we could now do an annual metrics collection of all farmers markets, anybody in that direct marketing world, and come up with this data so that we would know, this now raises, right, to a critical mass where we should probably invest our public dollars. And then, I just think how cool it is, just when somebody can grow something and then make something and then sell it at a livable wage and then feed their community. Isn't really that the basis of humanity? And that's where I think we could maybe do some investment and some public policy work.
So smart.
Okay. We're getting all charged up here in the pod. We're
we're making phone calls right now.
That's right.
But Kathy, I love what you said earlier, that analogy of kind of the swarm of mosquitoes and trying to kind of get everybody to move in the direction. And I think that has kind of classically been the issue with any sort of movement or revolution or kind of political charge is some just trying to get that mass movement in a certain area to really get change made. So I was hoping that you can kind of tell us a little bit about some of the successes that you have had passing laws and influencing public policy in Minnesota.
In the beginning, I didn't know what I was doing, right? I milk cows for a living and I milk goats and I raise livestock. But then you have, as you learn, you branch out into other areas. And the first one that we touched was our safe food sampling law at a farmer's market without a license. Prior to, again, these are old laws that don't fit anymore. And it wasn't until Cecilia Coulter was the market manager in Chisago County, brilliant woman. She saw that the rules for sampling food at her market, just 40 miles north of Minneapolis could do things that she wasn't allowed to do. And we said, really? there's a difference in food sampling between the Metro and Chisago. And then we found out, nope, there wasn't. The law, the Minneapolis knew it was a crazy law. So they were big enough they could do what they needed to do. So we gathered everybody. We gathered Minnesota Department of Agriculture, the Minnesota Department of Health. We had wonderful allies in the Minnesota Farmers Union. Minnesota Farmers Union was really critical that first iteration because we were newbies. Oh my goodness. I couldn't even find the state capitol, right? This is not what I do for a living, folks. But we learned. And then we ran into the ladies from the the Minnesota Cottage Food Producers Association. They weren't an association at that time, but they were bakers. And our law, so then we just began to find other people. And we were smart enough to know that we needed to ground it in food safety. So we went and met with the University of Minnesota Extension food safety team and said, so if we do this, can you help provide the training? I am capable of providing training on the legality side. I am not a food scientist. That's not my strength. So we had to find somebody in food safety. And so we gathered everybody together so that we could reassure everyone that those old laws, prior to 2014, if you wanted to sample food at a farmer's market, you had to have a license. And the only licenses that were available were for 20 days or 11 days. Well, I'm sorry, our markets are 30 days. I know, but it was all that was available. It was like, okay, we've got a round hole here. What can we shove in here? There were only square pegs available. So we just said, and it was really the ladies at the Department of Health. I call them the ladies of health. They're the ones that helped us figure out that. Colleen Paulus finally said, what do you need, Zeman? Here's what we need. You need to figure out a way to change this law, change the wording enough so that we can let people sample food. If you want us to increase produce, then we have to be able to sample kale chips. And we got to be able to do it without a license and yet safe. And so that's what we did. We created this law with all of the food safety people at the table. We've now got training. We now know we have to have hand washing stations and actually use them, folks. I always tell people, yeah, we can bring the hand washing stations, but you do have to use them. You actually wash your hands. Anyway, that's our internal joke. Yeah, the water will still be full in that jug at the end of the market if we don't do it right. Anyway, so that happened. And then we expanded the cottage food. Those were the baker ladies. So if you think about it, the minute the farmers markets quit in Minnesota, like October, November, you were making all of those cookies in your home kitchen, selling them at the farmer's market, no license needed, good to go. But now the market's over, but your customers still want to buy it, but the law didn't provide for that. So we said, why? Why would that magical? So no, we changed that. So now in Minnesota, an individual can form an LLC. She can sell up to $78,000 worth of cottage foods. We've created the list. By the way, I stole many of my items for the list from the California list. California had the first list that I saw. Many of them were in words that I didn't recognize because, we have the Norwegian slant, you have Portuguese slant, another slant. I'm like, I don't know what that word means, but we figured it out, right? We figured out what it meant. And now we are building out. So now we have Somalis that are cooking nice. And there's so many populations in Minnesota. So we're adding those words to our list as well. We've got thousands. So Minnesota, if it's a non-potentially hazardous food, so it's got to be a pH of 4.6 or lower or a water activity of 0.85 or lower. So it's dry enough so that at shelf level, there's no bad bacteria. There's thousands and thousands of products. You can do that in your home kitchen. As long as your label says these products are not subject to state inspection. And now it's up to 78,000 so per individual. So let's say, for instance, my brother and I want to both be registered. We can do 78,000 times 2 without a license in our home. Now we have to actually do the work, right? and get it sold, all of that. But so a family of 4 could do 4 times 78,000, right? It's pretty significant now that we could make some good money.
Wow, that's great. That's better than California. I think they cap it at like 50,000 for the business.
I think it's up to 75.
Oh, really?
But it's still for the business. And in fact, if you've got, we had sisters who lived in 2 different homes that were partners, and they could not get a cottage food permit because cottage food is designed to permit a kitchen. And so the 2 of them couldn't be legal partners and still get a cottage food permit. Dang. It was just silly. Yeah.
Well, Kathy, straws. I love what you said about, when you were wanting to get working on this food safety sampling without a license policy, that you wanted to make this change, but you recognize, like, I'm not a food scientist. And I think that's something that a lot of people, wanting to influence public policy kind of need to recognize, is that you have to partner with somebody that may have those skills that you don't have. So do you have any advice on, like, how to recruit those critical partners, or how to pull in those specialists or people that have specific training that you need, the people that have that credibility, where maybe the stakes aren't as high for those food scientists? They might not care about farmers markets at all. So how can market managers or food advocates, how can we recruit those people that we really need to, like, hammer those issues home?
Public policy, what I found, public policy is the most time-consuming enterprise that MFMA has, because it's really all about building relationships, right? And I've been told I've got an abrasive personality, which I firmly, yes, I do, because I'm tired of waiting, folks, and I keep telling people I don't have that much time left on this planet, and I'm tired of these old rules and getting our way for no reason but to control business. So if that's all it is, then let's go ahead and change things. So it still is about building relationships and finding common ground where you find it. And you will find, so I'm not always sure that the ag committees in Minnesota are our best bet. Mini ag, and I don't know how other states, like in Minnesota, we have a House and a Senate. And so we've got three branches of government. You've got the administration, which would be the governor, lieutenant governors. And then we've got the House and the Senate, and you've got two ag committees in each one. And yet in Minnesota, because we don't have a really vibrant data collection, a lot of our ag policies still really function at the commodity level, which is corn, soybean, pig, cow. I mean, that's just what they do. And so we have to always build this long case, right, nicely. And I try not to irritate everybody, but because the one time that I said, and it got caught in the Star Tribune, because I said, we have more produce farmers in the state than we have pig farmers. That did not play well in, a lot of the counties that have a lot of pig farmers. So that was, and I know I'm doing this on a podcast. Great. But it's, you still have to know whose toes you're going to step on, right? So just think of that. Produce farmers, a lot of our folks at the legislative level couldn't even say produce farmer. They had to call them gardeners. No, they're produce farmers. They sell thousands and thousands. It's just that they're not government subsidized. That's why it doesn't come to your level of recognition. But you've got folks out here that at the produce level are grossing $60,000 on an acre, right? If they're doing, depending on what they've got, or more. So these are profitable businesses. And again, I would argue that we don't necessarily need that money coming into individual farmers. I think we would be better served if that money would come in at the community level and build out community training, community food hubs, community commercial kitchens, community farm. That's where I think the strength would be, because then it's accessible to everybody in that community.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. That's so bizarre that they don't take produce farming seriously.
Well, you probably in California you do,
no.
But
kind of. I mean, we do. Actually, we do a little better than Minnesota on that level. There are many other areas where we have issues, but because we don't have the land for the big commodity farmers, we don't grow a bunch of corn and soybeans here. We don't actually have the land to farm many large animals.
Or the water.
Right, or the water.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or the water.
Exactly. So we are not quite as much of a commodity farming hub or large animal farming as, you and some other areas in the Midwest are. But the lack of respect for produce farmers just always blows my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're easier on the earth, the produce farmers, to an extent. Oh, Justine's
I'm like,
not sure. I'm not sure about that. Yeah. Anyway, it's amazing. Just changing that vocabulary. If you could just teach a public official to say produce farmer as opposed to gardener, I think that's a landmark.
Yeah, I feel like that is just so reductive to the amazing hard work that these produce farmers do. But I mean, it just kind of shows, the constituents that a lot of public figures tend to care about are the ones that are really backed by big business and whatnot.
Well, that's okay. So what you just said there, I think, is really the mouthful, right? So why are these policies set the way they are? Now, I still think it goes back to we the people that are shareholders in the big multinational food companies. We need to tell our multinational food companies, yeah, we want to be profitable, but some of the profit from this company doesn't need to come to us in cash on that stock we own. It needs to make sure that we're plowing goodness back into this planet. So why do you think corn and soybean are subsidized? Because multinational food companies need cheap inputs, right? They want cheap inputs, so they're going to make sure that there's more supply, so the price is depressed. And that's again why we're the local food shed. I really don't think a multinational company cares what we do in the local food shed, because we're not customers of theirs, right? They don't care. And it still goes back to we the people having influence with how we vote and how we spend our dollars, and exercising that. And then we have to be able to teach that. So that's also the other thing we have to teach our people. I think that's on us as farmers market people and direct marketing farmers and direct marketing food makers. So I think other states are a little bit better than Minnesota on this. We do not have a state policy in Minnesota that says if you're a food maker and you're going to sell your food product at a farmer's market in Minnesota, that at least part of your ingredients have to come from a local farmer. Many of our individual farmers markets say that, but it's not statewide. And I think that's a mistake. Why would you ever allow anybody to sell at your farmer's market? The apostrophe makes a difference in Minnesota. That is plural possessive, darn it. This is a market owned by us, by the farmers, and it's all of ours. So don't come in and try to sell food here if you're not willing to support your local farmers. So we've got markets that'll do it, but it's not a statewide thing yet. What do you folks do in California?
That's common. California doesn't require it either. No, I take that back. California actually has an unusual situation where you can run a certified farmer's market. That has to be only items of your own production. So our peach farmers can't sell peach pie, for instance, because if they don't grow the wheat for the crust, they can't sell it in the certified farmer's market. But on either end of the certified farmer's market or across the street from the certified farmer's market, we can place anybody. So we can place imported Italian olive oil, and we can place somebody obviously selling coffee beans, which is not local, although it's locally roasted at our markets. That's not a state requirement. So, there is no state requirement that says that what's really classified as an adjacent event, technically not part of the farmer's market, but in exactly the same place at the same time. There is no requirement that those vendors include local ingredients. And in talking to people from a lot of states across the country, I'd say there's very few laws that require that local ingredients be included in what's sold at farmers markets. And very, very few states have that kind of a requirement. So what do you see as the biggest issues and challenges that small farmers and farmers market operators are going to face in the years to come, or are facing now?
Some of them are within our control. I think that every farmer's market should insist that if you're selling a food product at the market, that you have to buy at least one ingredient from your local farmers. So if you're a baked good person, find somebody who's got eggs, right? I mean, this is because then the whole local food shed is supporting itself. I'm a little annoyed, when somebody says you should really be buying locally, and I'm just like, sure, I would love to have coffee at your local coffee shop as long as you're buying something local from your local farmers. Just let me know who those farmers are. And I don't mean one bushel of apples once a year. I mean consistently put it on a board, right? So, and just think, so that would be number one. I think the other thing is that we will probably need to look at farmers markets, maybe changing the days and the times that they sell products, because I don't know if it's always convenient for all of our shoppers. This one little market that I'm volunteering with, we realized that we were setting up on a Thursday from 4 to 7. Most of our shift workers get off at 3. So what we really want to do, right, is start our market at 3 o'clock. So that they can just, on their way home from getting off shift work, they can stop at the market, pick up something for supper, and go. I think that more markets should be, we're the grocery store. We are your one-stop grocery store. it is, I don't know about any other states, it is really expensive for markets to accept SNAP and debit and credit, right? Because that takes a person. And many of our markets in Minnesota are still volunteer run. So how you do that? So we're cobbling together that. We don't, there, if many of them that are city run or county run or Parks and Recs will run some of them, they have more capacity for that. But if you're truly just an independent farmer's market, you're going to have to come up with, $15,000, $20,000 a year in some kind of grants just to hold somebody to do all of that work, because that's tokens and reconciling bank accounts. And that's just, we've tried it. Every time a volunteer only market tries it, it fails. After 2 or 3 years, it's just hard to sustain if it's at the volunteer level only. So I would say we should all be mandating you have to buy something from a local farmer. We may need to look at changing times and dates and places to really attract our customers and continue. And we need to do more data collection to find out who is coming to our markets and who isn't coming to our markets, and what would we need to do that. And I would tell you the number one thing in Minnesota, we need to grow more farmers. And in Minnesota, we've got something, an office at the state level called the Emerging Farmers Office. Now, this was important that our legislature mandated some money to study the issue. The Department of Agriculture wrapped their arms around it. And so we know that's going to be emerging farmers. So a lot of them are going to be our BIPOC farmers, right? That have smaller acreages. I'm kind of still noodling on this one. This could be a controversial issue, but the smaller the acres, it'll force those farmers to do more direct marketing, where I think they will be more profitable. You get into the commodity, if you get a couple hundred acres, you're going to think the only market you have is the commodity world, where they set your price and you take whatever the cost is, right? And that's why we have planet degradation and we have soil erosion, because if the price is set by somebody else and it has nothing to do with your rising costs, what do those commodity farmers, the only solution they have is to farm every piece of land and maximize production. It may not be the most profitable. And we're in Minnesota, the southern half of our state has impaired waters, massively impaired waters due to agriculture. So I would tell you our biggest thing is to grow more farmers and to help them find their smaller plots of land, let them grow the land and livestock that would be good for that land, and then come up with the money to deck out the community commercial kitchens and food hubs. And now we're holding on to the wealth that our state can create. Minnesota, I remember in our Ag Econ days back in college, like a half a century ago, we were told Minnesota took all of our iron ore from the Iron Range in Minnesota and we shipped it out, and we let other states refine that. They made the money. We did not. We gave away our raw product. If we can build out the local food shed where we have the infrastructure to allow us to take the raw products that we are growing and then we make them into something and then we sell it back to our communities, now we're keeping that wealth in Minnesota. And that would be what every state should do. I still want to know, and I want to buy California almonds and pecans. We can't grow that here, right? But for the things that we can grow here, we should. And that's where I think that we should really look. Every state should do that. Like, what percentage of our food that we can grow in the state should we grow? And then let's do trade at the levels that we can't grow it. That would be, to me, a pretty decent system.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I remember growing up, I was in Arizona for a long time raising kids, and we shipped all of our citrus to Florida, who shipped all of their citrus to California, who apparently was shipping their citrus to Arizona. It was the most insane thing. I don't know if it was the trucking lobby that was creating that situation, but it was absolutely crazy. So I'm with you on that. So you're talking a lot about what's happening in Minnesota. You do a lot of advocacy work. I know that you do it at various levels. Where do you think your energy and our energy as an industry is best spent? On local, regional issues, or trying to work at the national level?
Well, it all takes energy and time and resources. And I have a finite source, right? I don't have an infinite. So for most of us, it will be at the state level. I think most of our laws are at the state level. We can have delegated authorities that interpret some of the food safety laws, but for the most part, the state level. at the federal, there's work we can do with INSAC, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. We're a member of that. We're members of other members that are members of that. So that's where we can work at water issues and soil issues and pesticide drift issues. But we're little voices. But one of our little voices gets heard every once in a while. So that's a good thing. I think that we should all, do we all know who our local officials are, right? That we would know them by name. Do we know who represents us in our state house or our state senate or wherever state you are? Do we know who sits? Would you know who your state senator who serves you in Congress? Do you know who their ag field staff person would be, right? I didn't for a long time. Now I do. Like, I know Senator Klobuchar and I know Senator Tina. We know these people now, and we can call them. I'm sure they think I'm annoying some days. Don't care. I'll still give them my 2 cents. They can I always tell them, keep or delete. This is my 2.2 cents. But we need to know that. Again, we farmers. One time in one talk I once did, I'm like, we should be billionaires. Everybody in this planet has to eat. And we own the food. So how did farmers get to be this below poverty level class of people? We have the food. But we should be the benevolent dictators.
Right? Good luck. Good luck eating that stock from the stock market, right? If you're investing in that and not farmers. Yeah, good luck. Good luck munching on that Bitcoin.
We need to rethink our role, and we need to take back, our control of our industry. That's the other thing. This is like, I don't work with or for the Minnesota Farmers Market. This isn't something I work for. This is who I am, right? I am a farmer. I produce food. And so this is my industry. And I don't like it when people take whacks at my industry and the people in my industry. And the people in my industry are the workers that are, pulling weeds in 110-degree weather, right? And this is my industry. And so we have to be invested. We have to be knowledgeable. It takes time. What I haven't yet figured out is how to help those of our folks that are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, right? How do I help them find time to have a public voice? Right. That's tougher. I don't have a good solution there yet.
It is tougher. I think organizations like yours and other state associations and national associations, for that matter, can be really effective in that way, because they can, as long as they can show that they've got X number of members, even if every one of those members isn't speaking up, each one has a vote. And so if you can represent that you've got a lot of constituents that you're communicating with regularly, and you can submit that when you're advocating, that's certainly helpful. Yes. Now, I think one of the challenges to that, and see if you've found this, is that farmers market farmers and participants and even managers can be kind of anarchists and can be hesitant to reveal financial information for a variety of reasons. There's a resistance to it, I think, just generally a lot of times on the part of a lot of our farmers and vendors. There's a fear that will translate into some other area of the government or what have you. So how does that reluctance to give up data limit your ability to influence policy on the association level?
At a market level, we've had pretty good success in vendors when we've asked for it. Give us financial, because we don't ask for it we don't ask for it directly. They can submit it anonymously, and our pitch there is to them: if we can build a case that this market is XYZ economic value, now we can attract investment from our EDAs or economic development authorities, right? So there's that argument. At a statewide level, I just want our farmers and our vendors to know that. So for instance, during COVID, right? If our farmers had, and we had a drought here, really bad. We were in the middle of, why should you all have bad droughts? Worse than we do. So I'm sorry. But for us, last year was like the worst drought we'd had in 33 years. And so finally, after a year, the legislature finally approved drought relief. So obviously livestock farmers got it, and then they reluctantly brought in the produce farmers, which I was proud of them for letting produce farmers get a little bit of money to offset that loss from the drought. We have a lot of our farmers and vendors do a cash business, right? Well, so my point to our folks is, Look, I'm not telling you how to run your business. I want you to know the risks and the benefits. If you track your money and you file a Schedule F, now you are eligible for that CFAP money that came in during COVID, right? If you have a Schedule F, now you're eligible for that drought relief money. If you choose not to do that, you just need to know that those are not available to you. Again, I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I want you to understand the risks and the benefits. And then you make a decision that's best for you and your family. And that resonates fairly well with a lot of folks, right? I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I'll teach you how to fish, and then you figure out what you want to do with that, right?
Yeah, that's so smart. So they're waving at me, and we got to start wrapping this up. But I do want to talk about one more challenge that I think we face in advocacy work, and that's both at the national level, where a lot of farmers markets and organizations are working on money from the USDA, and from talking to you, obviously, even at the state level. So when you're talking about something like FM 360 and getting money dedicated to community kitchens and farmers market operations and things, we're having to stand up to and speak back to people that are supporting us financially. So how do you manage that?
How do you bite the hand that feeds you?
That's right. How do you gracefully bite the hand that feeds you and tell them that they're not feeding you the right things and that they need to feed you more?
Well, I don't think they're doing all that good, right? I don't think they're doing that good work for us. I don't mind telling, right? They're not really. I think that people are willing to risk up to the point that they can afford to lose. If I challenge someone at the USDA level, there's very little I have to lose because they're really not giving us that much, right? If I challenge our folks in Minnesota, so they're not doing all that much for us anyway, right? So as long as I speak truth, right, that I will always be honest. If I am wrong, like new data comes in, I've had to change my opinion, I've had to change my answer. I'm always honest with that. But when I got to testify, decades ago, right before COVID, it feels like decades ago, to one of the Congress committees at the Washington D.C. Farmers Union brought me in. I told that committee, y'all need to stop making small organizations put up a match in these grants. If you continue to mandate a financial match, like you have to come up with 25%. You are committing to systemic inequity. I just yelled at him like, so it means that the poorest of the poor will never get money because they don't have 25% to match. You're saying that the people that always get the money are going to continue to always get the money. There was no risk to me to say that because right? We don't get that much money anyway. There's multiple ways to get money. Sometimes I think like right now, we're going to stand up something called field reporters in Minnesota. I want a reporter in every county in this state, 87 plus 11 tribal nations. And I'm right at 98 to report on growing conditions during the summer and market pricing because the USDA won't do it. If I see one more Minnesota crop report reporting on corn and soybean, I'll continue to scream at them. So fine, we'll stand them up ourselves. That does not require a grant. That does not require much of. We create the Google form and we just have people donate a little bit of time. Now, but that's 98 points of information every week. That's powerful. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do ourselves, right? We just have to really think outside the box. We need to take the box and throw it away and just say, and then be willing to work with whoever out there wants to work with us. If there's enough common, we do have something in common. We have half of our stuff in common. Work with that group. We are the flea on the fly on the net on the tail of the dog. We're gonna just need to, lock arms. So if California and Minnesota could do something together, great, let's do that. Right? Just because we're in the middle of, we're the flyover states and y'all aren't, we should still work together. There will be common ground. We will have common ground.
Absolutely. That's our theme. Can we at least agree that we're all in this together and want an equitable access to food? Right? Yeah. Kathy, thank you so much. We probably could do a 3-hour podcast with you. And I'm very sorry that we probably will not see you at the Intense Conference in San Diego, although I'm still looking for a lamb sitter for you to see if we can figure that out. But if I can find
you will be. I will be busy kidding and lambing in March. That will be a crazy.
I'm telling you, if I can find a goat and a lamb sitter, we will get you out here. But meanwhile, I mean, honestly, probably the podcast reaches even more people. So I'm glad that we've had you on today. That's been a pleasure. And
I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I really do. I admire what y'all do there and give you kudos for doing it.
Thanks.
I mean, somebody needs to.
Thank you.
Mutual admiration.
Ditto to you. Yeah, I just learned so much. So
absolutely. Thanks so much, Kathy. See you soon.
Okay. Have a good
day.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening today, and big thanks to all the market managers who help their new vendors get off to a successful start by suggesting they take Vendor 101 online from wherever they are. Our online classes and conference support our ability to provide insights and education every week on Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. Find more information about Vendor 101 by clicking the logo on the homepage at farmersmarketpros.com.
Farmers markets are all about connection, and all of us, operators, farmers, and vendors, keep learning. Connect with people just like you from various parts of the country and share what's happening in your area in the terrific conversations over in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community. If you're actively involved in a farmers market, please find us there, answer the 3 qualifying questions, and join the group. You can also message us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros or email us at connect@farmersmarketpros.com. If you're looking for further education, check out our online course offerings at farmersmarketpros.com. Thanks for listening to Tent Talk. Please leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you access your podcasts, and tell us and others how you're enjoying Tent Talk. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is proudly produced by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni-Mead. Original music by David Mead. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll have another great episode next week, so tune in.